Hey folks, welcome back to another episode of JavaScript Jabber. This week on our panel we have Steve Edwards.
Yo, from a cold and rainy Portland, which is typical for this time of year.
AJ O'Neill.
Yo, coming at you live from a beautiful day in the shed.
I thought it was the Purple Room.
It changes every time, you know that.
No, it doesn't. It's always purple.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's obviously it's purple.
Oh, okay.
For those that can see.
Right.
Yeah,
in case Tommy Edison is listening in.
He won't tell us where he is, but folks, just look up the county records. I think he owns his house. I'm Charles Max Wood from Top End Devs, and we have a special guest this week, and that's Corey Brown. Corey, do you want to say hello and let people know who you are and kind of what your background is?
Sure. Hi, Corey Brown. I'm coming at you from St. George currently, not where I regularly live. That's where I am right now.
Oh, that's so
nice. Must be warm down there.
It's warmer than it's warmer than up north, that's for sure, which is why we're here.
I have a friend that lives down there. I'm always so jealous.
It's lovely. I am currently I'm architect at a place called Omni. We are a JP Morgan company. And I've been in the industry for about 15 years. I enjoy speaking and sometimes on occasion arguing with people about JavaScript stuff. Oh.
Yeah, you picked a fight with our friend Dan, and then he ran away. It was like Corey's coming.
Good.
That's right. Well, it was either that or he had something else going on, but you know.
It reminded me of the argument on a Family Guy where the rich guy rolls up and he says, "Oh, Reginald, I disagree," and then peels off. That was kind of the extent of the argument.
Ouch.
Yeah. So anyway, from what I am gathering, and it looks like AJ was part of the conversation on Twitter as well, and so you all can tell me where I get this wrong, but there was a conversation. AJ was suggesting maybe we do an episode on some of the less understood DOM APIs, and then Dan asked the question, do React developers really need to understand the DOM APIs, because React does a lot of these things for you? And you said, yeah, they do. And he kind of disagreed. And so the idea was you could come on and
make my case.
He could kind of have that conversation with you. And then he ran away because you're so intimidating. I think it's the beard, but
it's got to be it. It's a little bit of gray right there. It really is like, oh, he must really know what he's talking about.
That's right. You've got a real gray beard in the house, folks. So anyway, let me know if I missed anything important there. And then if you or AJ want to chime in and give us a little more context, we can get going on talking about this, because I think it'll be interesting.
I think that's the sum of it. And had I known that you could get on this podcast just with a simple, I don't think that's quite right comment, I would have done it a long time ago. But no, it's good.
All right. So is there anything more to it? Did I miss anything?
No, I think that was the conversation we had on Twitter, but I guess the premise of the argument is, do React developers really need to understand the DOM? Is React sufficient for your needs? I think there's a bigger question under that. More like, given the rise and the universality essentially of frameworks out there, the vanilla JavaScript crowd has grown increasingly smaller. So given that a lot of people make the argument you really can't do JavaScript work anymore without working inside of a framework. Therefore, do you need to know the platform upon which that framework is built, or are those frameworks sufficient to accomplish everything you need? Do you want to live in the abstraction, or do you need to be able to dive down into the metal sometimes? At least that's the way I am thinking about the question.
Okay. And your answer, it seems, is obviously, sometimes you need to dive into the metal. So do you have examples, or do you have an argument for that?
Yeah, actually, I had, it was interesting, just a couple days after that conversation, which we're making it sound like it was a monumental thing. It was kind of a passing thing. But with that said, just a couple days later, I was working on a problem, and it was attaching a pop over a drop down and kind of anchoring it to an element. And I was refactoring something that had done this, and the old version was using just pure React, as much as React as they could. So using all the hooks and all that stuff, and even then you have to do some event listening. Even when you're trying to go completely into React, you have to do event listening. So you add event listener on scroll and that sort of stuff. But in the refactor, I just ripped all of that stuff out, and I did a very simple event listener on scroll and an event listener on resize, and use the same handler for both. And it was not, the previous version had a lot of bugs. It would not track well. It would drift, and things would get out of whack. Ripping all of that framework stuff out and dropping just down into the very simple, scroll event listeners and resize event listeners are not like new DOM APIs. They're super, they've been around forever. But just leaning on those, fixed all of the bugs it had with it. It is now buttery smooth. And it was kind of a lesson that these frameworks, they're designed to do something, that like a specific thing. And when you're doing what those things are designed to do, they work really well, and you should lean into them. But they aren't designed to do everything. And when you try to force that square peg into that round hole for everything you try to do, and you are not aware of, or you disregard the platform upon which it's built, which is designed to do a slightly different thing, you overcomplicate it. Actually, I was just reading this morning. I was rereading Out of the Tar Pit, that old article. I can't remember the author's names. That's really about complexity, about the difference between necessary complexity and unnecessary complexity. And depending on what you're trying to do, the frameworks can introduce a lot of unnecessary complexity. And that's what I found. That's what I have been finding over the last 15 years. So, yeah.
You know, Chuck, I have to add the obligatory joke in here that this seems like a really overreaction to this question.
Wow. There it is.
But, you know, I mean, so Corey, my background is I started out in PHP, straight PHP world, and I got into Drupal for a while, and then Angular and Vue. And I've never played with React myself. But to me, I'm like, my answer to this question is, duh. Yes, you need to know both. I'm just like, really?
Yeah.
How would you not need to know the underlying basics of any given language? There's no way that any framework, I think, is going to be able to do everything that the underlying platform can do. And, you know, I listen to, as woke as he is, I still listen to Chris Ferdinandi quite a bit. And, you know, I get his newsletter, and he makes a lot of great points. You know, you listen to other podcasts and people talk about using the platform. You know, use the platform, use the DOM APIs, use what's already there. And even in Vue and Laravel and Drupal, you know, there's a lot of helper functions. There's a lot of things that will do stuff. But time and time again, you just got to get down to the basics and use some of the basic tools. I mean, a framework's not going to do everything, and why should it? You know?
Yeah. And more than that, a few more things that add a little bit of color to that. So the original, the new one uses the new popover API. I don't know if any of you guys know of it or used it. It's fantastic. Yeah. It's lovely.
I keep wanting to play with it.
Yeah, I've seen a lot about it. Haven't had a chance to get down and use it yet, because that's that's one thing that JavaScript's had to do a lot of, is anytime a pop-up popover stuff with dialogues, modals, whether it's date pickers, you know, you name it. That's always something JavaScript had to do. I
saw that was in the spec, and I was just like, oh, my life just got better. But
it's a delight to use. And 90% of the code I was able to eliminate from the pure React version was just state management, which again goes back to the Out of the Tar Pit article, where it identifies the primary source of unnecessary complexity is state management. And you can just eliminate all of that. You do not have to worry about it. And so you have the scroll handlers and the resize handlers, but the thing that really reduced the complexity of it entirely was the popover API, which is not available. It's not a React thing. It's a platform thing.
Right.
It reminds me very much of, I mean, you guys, I'm sure you all remember the left pad incident, right?
Yes.
Comes up.
What was it, 8 lines or something like that?
Yeah.
Broke the internet.
But
Not-
can
not
you
all-
give
go ahead.
people context? Because I'm sure we have listeners.
Yeah,
that weren't
sure.
around back
So I love JavaScript. I love the JavaScript community. I have been doing it for 15 years. I've learned other languages, but I have only ever been professionally paid to write JavaScript. And but one thing that the JavaScript community does, I think, poorly, or has done poorly, is an over-reliance on abstractions, over-reliance on libraries, over-reliance on frameworks.
This is not just a JavaScript problem. I'm just going to point that out.
No, it's
everybody
not.
does this. Every community runs into this.
Yeah, I think some do it better than others, but
fair. That's fair. But yeah.
So what had happened is in this over-reliance on frameworks, the hyperization of don't repeat yourself, we have created libraries, so we never have to write the same thing over and over. But of course, sorry, I'm tangenting a little bit. The libraries end up, all the overhead of importing it and do this all their stuff, end up writing more code sometimes than it would be just to write the thing. In this case, that's exactly the thing. So this library literally pads the left side of a string, so the beginning of a string, with some characters that you give it.
Right.
Turns out that there has been for a very long time a native way to do this in JavaScript. But we decided, a lot of people decided, yeah, shocker. A lot of people decided, no, we're going to use the library because this is going to be better tested. I don't really understand the logic of it.
Well, I think that pad start came after left pad.
It may have.
I think that pad start was one of when they were calling it ECMAScript 6, where they were just, before they went hog wild crazy and they were just introducing things that the language actually needed. That was around the time that pad start was introduced. And then, of course, that didn't get implemented by browsers until 6 years later or whatever, because they prioritized dumb stuff that we don't need over stuff that we actually do need.
In any case, at the time this happened, pad start had already been in JavaScript for some time. So
yeah,
if and this gets into the problem of transient dependencies and deep dependencies and stuff. A lot of people didn't even know that they had a dependency on this library. So what happens is the owner of this library, for reasons I don't recall and history will probably forget, got upset and pulled his library. And at the time, NPM allowed you to do this. He just deleted it. And all of a sudden, everybody's builds in the entire
the internet
world. Well, everyone says the internet broke. The internet never broke.
No, it's true.
The builds, everybody's
the
builds.
Web.
It would, the pre-release part of the web broke.
Right.
So nobody's site went down, but nobody could deliver anything anymore either for a little while until they could figure this out. And it was a huge joke in the whole software community. Oh, JavaScript, they don't know what they're doing over there, which is probably to some degree true. But so anyway, so that's how it all went down.
Yep,
as I recall.
Right. So the point you're making then is, if people had been relying on the underlying core API of start pad instead of using the left pad library, then their stuff would have just kept on working.
It goes deeper than that even, because to AJ's point, if you look at if you ever looked at the code for left pad, it was very, very few lines of code.
It was super simple. Yeah.
Yeah. Very simple, very straightforward. Anyone could have wrote this. But we used a library instead of everyone writing it themselves, writing their own utility library. We used a third-party library, which created a dependency on someone else who, at their own whims, could do whatever they wanted. Our insistence on outsourcing our code this way, the simple code, kind of created this problem. Everyone could have written their own left pad and then updated as they felt ready to pad start when it came into JavaScript. But instead, it got buried deeply, deeply, deeply into these dependencies that nobody even knew was there. We don't keep up.
Yeah.
We don't update our stuff. They didn't, LeftPad didn't update theirs to use the native or anything like that. And so we get into the system where there's these blind corners of things that we're relying on. We have no idea we're relying on them because we've outsourced even the simplest of stuff.
Can I clarify something here? Because what you're pointing out is not just the people who, like, in their project said, I need LeftPad, right? It was a dependency of a whole bunch of the other libraries. So even if they were making the kind of decision that you're talking about, where they're saying, you know what, something like LeftPad, it's simple for me to write my own little library that does it. Or, if I'm late enough, I can use the native JavaScript API that does it. But I had other things that were solving more complex problems for me that also relied on LeftPad. So even if I was making some of these better decisions, I still fell prey to this because my other underlying stuff wouldn't build.
That's right, because of a more of a community problem, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
We as a community have kind of fallen into this, and so which is why I do think that, like, dependencies come with a certain amount of cost that's often very hidden, that we don't acknowledge, we don't recognize. I'm not saying we shouldn't have dependencies. We shouldn't rely on frameworks or libraries. We definitely should. There are great things that come with them, but to do so too often or without acknowledging that there is a cost associated with that, I think has bitten us as a community and individually several times, and we still haven't learned the lesson that maybe we should be a little bit more intentional about the dependencies that we bring on board.
Right. So let me summarize a little bit, because I have some thoughts here too, but I want to make sure that we've kind of covered what you've already covered. So you've basically pointed out that you can use the DOM APIs to simplify the path that your code takes and get more reliable results. You've pointed out that depending on somebody else's code can wind up causing you issues if they change things in a way that you don't expect, including having the library go away. One thing that I've picked up on some of this, right? So I've learned not I guess at the level where I was getting paid to do it. I've learned Angular, I've learned Vue, I've learned React, mostly because I was doing the podcast and I wanted to sound like I knew what I was talking about, because I at least kind of knew what I was talking about. And in those cases as I was picking things up, and also with my history with, like, Ruby on Rails or some of the other, systems or frameworks that I've used, a lot of times when you're learning them, they give you a way of doing things. And so you kind of do things the React way, for a lack of a better way of doing it, right? And as you build those apps, it's often appropriate for you just to use those and not think too deeply about, hey, is there a simpler way to do this, or is there a better way to do this? And so that there's a lot of value in kind of doing the accepted happy path way that the framework gives you, right? And I think this is where Dan is saying, for a lot of developers, if they never deeply learn a lot of these DOM APIs, they're going to be fine. They're going to be able to write code that works. You're going to be able to deliver working features. Is this just, I mean, is that wrong? Or is there a certain point you get to where all of a sudden it becomes really, really valuable to know these APIs? Yeah. Or is there some other X factor that you know about that I'm not thinking of that makes the difference, right? That it's like, okay, you're totally good using the React way until you have to do this. Yeah. Or until this changes, or until your code's a certain size, or whatever.
I think people in situation life is complicated, so there's no one answer here. But right. Obviously, you can be productive in straight React or straight Vue or straight Angular, whatever it is. You can get some stuff done, particularly if you're kind of a junior engineer. But
good, get paid, right?
Right, exactly. Right. There's an element of practicality there, immediate practicality. But I'm reminded of my calculus classes in college. Calc 1, we spent an entire semester going over how to do by hand, like derivatives and summations and all this stuff.
Mhm.
And it was
Summations and limits.
hard. Yeah. It was so hard.
I'll get my mom on the show. She teaches this at the high school.
This is giving me nightmares.
And then I had the same teacher for first Calc 1 and Calc 2. And the second semester we went into Calc 2. On day 1, he said, okay, so last semester we learned all this stuff. Now I'm going to show you how to do that real fast. And in 5 minutes, he taught the entirety of Calc 1 with some simple, like, do this, move this down here and do this, multiply that, and you're done. And that's it. And everyone groaned, and he just got a kick out of doing that every year, you could tell, because he taught the entirety of Calc 1 in 5 minutes in Calc 2. But then he pointed out, like, why did we go through all this stuff? It's important to understand why and how we got to this point. Because I can just show it to you, do this, and it works, but you don't know why it works. But now you do. You had Calc 1. You know why it works. You can now have inferences and understandings that you wouldn't have had otherwise. And this is exactly the same thing. When you jump into a framework and you learn the frameworkisms, the reactisms or the angularisms, whatever it is, you can be productive. You know the incantations to make to produce something. But that's what they are. They're incantations. If you know the platform, if you begin to understand how was this thing built, what is it doing under the hood, it ceases to become incantations and it starts to become recipes. And you say, oh, okay, cool. That's a cool bread recipe. I'm going to do this thing and create like an orange loaf or a sourdough or whatever it is. Whereas if you're just head down this, you don't exactly know how bread is produced or how your application is, how it functions under the hood. It's you're less useful than you could be.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is like music to my ears, and I could probably talk for a half hour with examples of how all this is true, going from my days literally in banking, in tech support, in anything. The more you know the platform, the more function, the better you can do, just because you know how things go underneath and you're not relying on layers and layers on top of things. But I think, and not even when you're building stuff, the bigger issue that you're going to come across is when you're trying to troubleshoot. Mm-hmm. So if something breaks and you have no clue how it's functioning underneath, then how are you going to fix the problem?
Yep.
Where are you going to look at? What are you going to look at? I can, vouch for any time I've been, whether it's tech support, whether it's, being as a developer, and I've written stuff and I've had to go back and fix it. I'm Veterans Day, and I'm going to be fixing some bugs in a application that I have, but I know where to go. Pretty sure I know where to fix it because I know how it functions underneath the hood. And, the example I've given before, not to belabor this one, is language. I'm a Spanish speaker, and to me, learning language came easy, but the way I learned it was learning verbs, learning nouns, learning how verbs are conjugated, learning the rules of the language, instead of the people that amaze me, that can learn conversational. They can come in and just take some, quote unquote, conversational classes where they learn phrases and sort of piece them together, but they really don't know the underlying rules and concepts of how those sentences are put together. So that's always been my tendency. But I mean, just to validate what you're saying, yeah, anytime you know the underlying details and concepts of how something is put together, you're going to be much better, not only at developing, but also figuring out bugs, because bugs are going to happen. If you're writing bug-free code, let me know, and I want to know how you do it because it doesn't happen very often.
So I want to jump in here because I feel like there's still a little bit of nuance or play within this argument, right? And I'm going to use fixing cars as an example, right? Just because it's kind of a concrete thing that people understand, right? And so when I married my wife, I knew how to change the oil on my car. That was about it, right? And her dad knows how to change. I mean, pick a thing on the car, right? He can make it fixed, and and so the first time our car broke down, he came up and we pulled it out and put it back in. We fixed it. We replaced the part, and I was proficient at making bolts go in and out, right? And so I could open the clamps or whatever, on hoses, or so I could do all of those things. And so for a lot of the simple things, I really was okay fixing my own car. But the issue came in when I had to diagnose the actual problem. And in fact, I'm still kind of at the point where about half the time, if I run into a problem with my car, I call him up and say, this is what it's doing. It's, and he goes, oh, that sounds like the whatever. Right. And so then I can go figure out how to change it out. But a lot of it just comes from a deep understanding of how the car operates, how the engine works. But a lot of it also comes from experience, right? And so I'm hearing Steve talk about, if I'm in this code base and I need to troubleshoot it, I can figure it out because, I know how everything kind of goes together. And I'm just, I guess the feeling is, and I see this, I mostly work in Rails. And so I see a lot of people do the same kinds of things, right? And you generally mostly use the Rails APIs until you get to the point where they don't do a thing well, and then you kind of reach into the tool bag of, okay, now I'm into the underlying stuff. But I mean, you can go a long ways with just what the framework gives you. And so I guess what I'm saying is that, and it sounds like you, Corey and Steve and AJ, we're all kind of the mindset where it's like, look, I want to master this domain, right? I want to be able, if there's a thing to be done, I want to be able to do it, right? If I run into a problem to be solved with JavaScript, even if I'm working in React or Vue or vanilla, or, we did an episode where I talked about the framework I use, which is Stimulus and Hotwire. I want to be able to deliver whatever it is that's needed, right? And Stimulus and Hotwire are so lightweight that you have to use DOM APIs. You don't really have a whole lot of choice. But the point is that I think there are a lot of people that get by just on React, right? And then there are the handful of DOM APIs that React kind of pushes you, hey, we're not going to invent a better way to do this because this is kind of the way to do it. And so, anyway, the point I'm getting to is I think there are a couple of reasons why you may or may not really deeply care about deeply learning some of these APIs. And one of them is a lot of people really are just comfortable showing up and just doing what it says on the React tin. And, they know, maybe they know React super duper deeply. And so they never really reach into that because they can either find somebody else to solve the problem for them that way, or they're not really driven to understand how all this stuff works under the hood. And on the other hand, maybe you just get people, and I worked with people this way too, where, I mean, whatever the bare minimum was to just get the job done was what they learned.
Yeah.
And so I guess what I'm going to ask next is that okay? I mean, are you handicapping yourself? Like, I'm not talking like morally, right? But are you really deeply handicapping yourself here, right? Is this going to hurt you in the long run? Or can you just get by doing that for the rest of your career?
Yeah. Actually, that's something I have thought a little bit about. So I think software development is a little bit unique in the world of like work. Most people that I run into genuinely love what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Right. This is not normal, I think, for most of the world. A job's a job for them. They go there, they are mildly depressed while they're doing their thing. They get it done, and they just are so glad to clock out and go home.
I could never live that way, ever.
Yeah, me neither. That's not me. But some people, most people, I think, live that way. They derive their life, their satisfaction, their joy outside of work. And I do too, to some extent, but I do derive joy at work as well, and meaning and satisfaction. But there are still many people in software development, especially the ones that were kind of sold, hey, go write software, you make a whole bunch of money, and they want to go make a whole bunch of money, and now writing software they don't really love, that they could have done other things to make a whole bunch of money. But it's just a job for them. And I think for those people, that's fine. It's fine. Just go do your job, clock out, go home, and don't worry about it. Like, no problem. But understand that just means you're going to be perpetually a mid-level engineer. That's just, you will. Whether you get paid more than that, I don't know, but you'll never really be better than mid-level. And that is actually fine because...
Okay, hang on. So I just want to clarify. You're saying that you really can't be a high level, I don't know what the term is, senior architect level engineer without understanding the underlying DOM APIs.
Yeah, I don't think you can, because I don't think you can. You mentioned before someone who really knows React and just lives in that. I don't think you can really know React without knowing the platform and how React works with the platform.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's no such thing as a React expert that doesn't know about pad start. You can't be an expert in React and not know basic core APIs of JavaScript or basic core APIs of the DOM. I mean, I guess maybe you could be an expert in React and not know insert adjacent HTML, but I actually find it hard to believe that either, because to be an expert in React, you must have come against cases where React doesn't solve the problem well or performantly, and then you would have had to have learned insert adjacent HTML.
I agree with you, but I think this is a case that people make, and I think a lot of people think they're getting by on it. So,
well, I want to challenge the very premise, which is that somehow your laziness or you're just getting by, not doing deep dives. There's so many things that so to your talk, Corey, when you were talking about the difference between something that's intuitive and unintuitive, I actually disagree with you on a lot of points of that talk, but because I watched it once it got posted, but I agree with you probably more than I disagree with you. And there's a certain amount to, like, okay, which is more intuitive, left pad or pad start? Now, in that particular case, I'm going to argue that left pad is more intuitive because pad start is directional based on locale. So if you're doing Japanese, then it's going to pad the top. If you're doing reverse language and RTL language, then it's going to pad the right. But in general, yeah, pad start and pad left and pad start are, and for someone that is in one of those languages that's top to bottom or right to left, then pad start would probably be more intuitive. But in general, at the face of it, without going into the nuance, is pad start or left pad more intuitive? Neither one is more intuitive. They're equally intuitive in terms of, I want to, in my language, add some padding that's going to be what I think the start is. And you're going to pick left pad or right pad based on, what your language is, or pad start or pad end based on whether you want it to be at the beginning or there or whatever. But there's not, like, it's not that one's more intuitive. It's not that one's more difficult to learn. It's that which one did you encounter first? And I think a lot of this stuff, it's not a matter of, well, isn't the framework just fine? Because it's not even an issue of the framework. Because if you're using the framework, well, you should still be using pad start. Like, there's nothing about React that has anything to do with pad start. There is a reason that if you're using React, you'd never encounter insert adjacent HTML. But there's not a reason in React that you would never encounter pad start, right? So
you're flirting with my next question, but keep going.
So a lot of this stuff is just, it's not a matter of, well, do you have to be more of an expert? Now, an expert is going to go back to first principles and learn, or maybe not first principles, but like an expert is going to get down to, okay, what is the thing when all the fluff is removed? I think that's a quality of an expert. But even if you're not an expert, it's not like, oh man, I can't believe I had to go on MDN. Can you believe it? Like, instead of hitting up GPT or Stack Overflow, I typed MDN in my search query. Oh man, I need some Advil. That's not what's happening. It's just a matter of what your muscle memory is. Are you hitting Chat GPT first, or are you hitting MDN first? Now, granted, a lot of the articles on MDN could stand to be improved because they kind of went backwards a few years ago, and now they've gone forwards again. So I think MDN is back on par with W3 schools. Because they were better, and then they got worse, and now they're okay again. But,
So what do you think, Corey, Steve?
I'm trying to suss out the question there. So yeah, I agree with. It sounds like you're making the argument that kind of like what I made before, that React or these other like UI frameworks are designed to do a certain thing. It's like, if you remember when React first came out, they were marketing themselves as the V in MVC. Right? They don't really do that anymore, but at the time that's what they were kind of marketing themselves as. And by implication, that means they don't do the M and the C. That's your job to understand. We just do the V.
MVC being
model view controller, right?
Yeah, just to put that out there.
Yeah.
So they did the interface. They didn't do the data, and they didn't interface the data to the view.
Yeah.
That was
the top layer.
Right.
They say view library. I think that's the way I've always heard it described.
Yeah, I don't think that's an accurate description. It probably wasn't an accurate description at the time either, but certainly not now. But regardless, they were making a concession that we don't do everything, but we do this thing. And all frameworks are kind of that way. And if you live as long as the problem to be solved is something that the framework aims to solve, you can live in that framework, and you don't have to dive down. But to create an application, you will have to do more than what the framework solves. Charles, you mentioned you do a hotwire stimulus, and it's very lightweight, and therefore you have to learn DOM APIs. It's not aiming to solve all the problems. React doesn't aim to solve all the problems.
It claims essentially to be the C in MVC, and it leaves the V up to you writing HTML and the M up to your APIs, and you can do those however you want.
Yeah. So in that sense, AJ, I think you're right. You cannot become an expert at your job, even if your job is to write React, unless you understand more than just React, more than just the framework that you're operating in. Because your job, I don't know of a job whose definition would keep them only within the bounds of a framework. That just unless maybe you're working in a very batteries included framework like Rails or something.
Right. Well, even in the battery, you said Rails, but even in the batteries included frameworks like Rails, you still frequently have to deviate from what the framework gives you, either directly or because it just doesn't have a piece of the framework that does the thing you need.
Yeah.
Well, addition is not part of Rails, right?
Right.
String concatenation. Actually, I think Rails did hijack string concatenation for a long time.
It did a whole bunch with active support, but yeah.
But in general, in a sane language, the framework isn't taking over addition, concatenation, basic string and number support.
Yeah. Well, active support was written for Rails, but it's mostly orthogonal. I mean, it's required by Rails, but you can use it in other projects without having Rails and get all the niceties it gives you.
And now that Rails or Ruby has UTF-8 by default, active support doesn't hijack those things, right?
Not as much. It touches everything. We could talk about whether that's a good idea or not, but that's not this show. I was curious, Steve, if you had anything to add before I kind of push us to the next question I have on this. Then,
not really. I mean, I'm still a bit confused about what the question that AJ said anyway, which is par for the course. But
I didn't ask a question.
No, I did.
I made a
asked
comment.
a question, and it was effectively, can you be a high level senior developer without knowing this stuff? And are you
don't think
your
so.
career
I don't
by
think
not
so.
knowing it?
I mean, I pretty much said that up front. I mean,
yeah.
I think the general percentage that I can remember seeing, like, for instance, going back to the Drupal world, was 80-20, where the framework, the CMS, whatever, out of the box is going to do 80% of what you need. And the last 20% is what you need, you're going to need to do yourself with a little customization with some writing code. In this case, I think it could be, you could translate that to say React, Vue, Angular, Rails is going to do 80% of what you need by itself. And in a lot of cases, maybe it's 100% depending on the simplicity or the complexity of what you're doing. But that last 20%, you're going to need to know how things work under the hood in order to be able to get to what you really need to do.
Yeah. Just as a quick example of that, if you're writing in React and you're writing out HTML or JSX, one thing it doesn't cover at all is ARIA. Like, you need to understand ARIA. You just, that's absolutely necessary. That's not React.
Nope.
Yeah, that's a whole can of worms where you get
is.
into what's the term? I can't believe
accessibility.
Thank you, accessibility. Right.
A11Y.
Yeah. And also, just to be clear, like, depending on what your goals are in life, there's nothing necessarily wrong with never becoming a senior like engineer. Like, go do your thing, man. Do what makes you happy. And if being a mid-level engineer for your career gets you the money you need to do what makes you happy, by all means, go, do that. That's fine.
Yeah.
But if you're going to your manager and like, I think I should be a senior engineer, I want to get paid like a senior engineer, well, you're going to have to learn some stuff outside of that framework.
Yeah. The example I've used with a bunch of people is, some people want to learn to code because they love it and they just want to dive into every piece of it. And some people want to learn to code so they can make enough to go live on the beach and go surf in the afternoon.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with either one. Just know who you are.
Yeah.
Okay. So it sounds like, and I think AJ most directly touched on this, but let's say that somebody is, they accept the argument. Okay, I do have these ambitions for my career. I do want to be able to expertly solve these problems. So I need to start learning these DOM APIs. And I'm also going to deliver the premise, and you can argue against it if you want, that a lot of times people don't learn these APIs because the framework does give you a way to do it. And so you just never become aware that the API even exists to do the thing. So how do people, and you can tell me if I'm wrong about that as part of your answer, but how do people then go, okay, I'm a React guy, or I'm a Vue guy, or I'm an Angular guy, and I want to deliver elegant, well-written, well-engineered solutions, and so I need to learn these DOM APIs. Which ones do they learn first, and how do they learn those things so that they can start to become this high-level engineer?
Oh, that's a good question.
And is my premise wrong? That people aren't learning it because the framework just does it for them?
I don't think it's that the framework does it for them. Honestly, I think I'm most familiar with React, and so I'll speak for React here.
That's fair. I think most people listening probably do React. So
the ecosystem has solutions for it. So React doesn't. For instance, I talked before about using the Popover API, and one of the reasons we started doing that is because we have a library in our application that handles pop-ups. And it is flaky as all get out when it comes to tests. It does not perform well. There's all kinds of problems with it. And so that's why we're looking for more native solutions. But the reason it exists at all is because someone came in. I'm a React engineer. I need this thing. Someone created a library to do this thing inside of the React ecosystem. All I need to learn is this simple little API for this library, rather than all this complex API for the DOM. And I think this is conceptually what people get wrong. They think that the lower level stuff is complicated. This library has a much nicer API. Many times that's true. Many times that's not true, or not as true as people seem to want to think it is. And so you end up with this bloated situation where I'm gonna get a library that has a nicer API rather than learning the platform API. I think that's what tends to happen fairly often.
So what should people be picking up first, and how do they make sure they're learning the right things that are going to move them ahead?
Yeah, I wish there were a good, simple answer to that. It kind of reminds me when people ask, I'm just starting out as an engineer. What book should I be reading? What sources should I be reading? I'm like, oh man. I mean, there isn't a book that I used to have. I used to point people to JavaScript, the good parts. That's way outdated. I would not recommend reading that now.
Right.
There isn't a compendium of, you want to get great, here are the resources. Unfortunately, what I tend to do now is point people towards resources like email newsletters or podcasts or things like that, where people are talking about stuff. And I send them to, honestly, AJ, you mentioned MDN. I send them to MDN all the time. That is the unofficial, or maybe it's now the official platform documentation. Go there. I tell them, like, look, you always need to be looking for stuff. I will sometimes go to like MDN and look at the list of HTML tags, just like, what have I forgotten about, and go through and just read them and say, oh, I didn't know that existed. I'm going to try to incorporate that in there. And this reminds me. So I had thought of this earlier when you were talking about something else, but one thing that is incredibly useful for understanding how things work, or maybe what you should be learning. I remember years ago, Paul Irish. Do you guys know?
Mm-hmm. We've had him on the show, I think.
Yeah.
Haven't we?
Paul,
maybe not. Anyway.
In any case, years ago, he wrote or he made a couple of videos on. The first one was 10 things I learned from the jQuery source code. And what he did, he just did this little video where he opened up the source code for jQuery and just walked through it. And like, oh, this is cool. Let me tell you about what's going on here and what I learned about this. And it blew my mind. I was like, holy crap, this is amazing. It didn't occur to me to do that. And I started kind of doing that more. I'm going to look at the source code. How are they doing this? How is this library that I like doing this thing that seems magical to me? And I figured it out, and then take it a step farther. And you know what? I'm going to recreate. I recreated jQuery. It was crap. It was not performant, but the act of doing it, like, opened my mind widely to all kinds of new techniques and interesting things. And I think that is a good exercise. I think doing that, building into your career. I do this. I also tell engineers that I mentor to do this every day. I spend the first hour of your day on company time learning. Go read some articles, go build some throwaway thing, but spend that first hour learning something new every day. The act of seeking out, I think, is going to expose you to these kinds of things. But I don't have, like I said, a compendium of like, here are the things you need to know necessarily.
So we did an episode about 5 years ago with a guy named Carl Mungazi, JavaScript Jabber number 408, all about reading source code.
He was also a host on React Roundup for a while.
Right. So the whole, I can still remember doing this episode where we talked to him about reading source code and how to do it and the benefits of it and so on. And so anyway, episode 408, if you want to listen to that.
Yes, I think it's more about the practices you build for yourself as an engineer, less than the sources you turn to. The sources are good, but I think the practices help give you those sources, I guess, is a way I might put it. Help you discover those sources. Because I think they change over time a lot.
I think one of the best things that front end people can do to improve their craft is to listen to people that just do programming and, more importantly, engineering and architecture outside of the front end space. Because I think the front end space is a cesspool, and the thought leaders in the front end space are oftentimes just people that have, I don't know, really cool socks, and I don't know how they become,
but I would piss people off.
Oh,
I don't know how they become these thought leaders, but so many people in the front end space, they're not people. Let me rephrase it. You'll get a lot more out of listening to people like Rob Pike and Jonathan Blow, Casey Moratori, listen to people that do game dev, listen to people that do server-side dev, listen to people that do Go or Rust or Zig, or, because most of anybody that asks me, how do I learn to program? What I'm going to say is, here's a bunch of great resources for Go, because Go is a language you can learn in a weekend. You don't have to have previous programming experience to get into Go quickly. You can write actual real programs in Go that, you can write terminal games like tic-tac-toe type of stuff or whatever. It's a really great language. And once you learn Go in particular, then you go back to something like JavaScript and you're like, whoa. I don't need this 95% of the language. This 5% does everything I need. And it's faster and smaller and easier to learn.
They used to say the same thing about JavaScript that you just said about Go. It's interesting. A thing I've often said about JavaScript is JavaScript has within it this very beautiful and elegant language. If you stay within those bounds, it's a wonderful language, and there's a whole lot of
100%.
I'll take some issue with I guess the way that you positioned the thought leaders in the front end space. I do think there is a lot of value that comes from many of them. I think, but what I will say, there's a couple of points I would add on top of it, and that is that it took me. I had an experience earlier in my career where I realized that even the most experienced and knowledgeable people in the industry are just people. Like they're almost kind of fair. They're making it up as they go in many of the same ways that we are. They just have been doing it longer. And we tend to idolize is the wrong word, defer to them maybe too much at the expense of our own rational thinking. And I think we could do more of rational thinking, rational thought in there. But with that said, I will very much concur with you, AJ, on expanding your horizons beyond the domain space. I mentioned before the seminal paper, the Out of the Tar Pit. And I also mentioned before that there isn't a compendium of resources. However, I have been thinking for a long time about putting together a list of these like must reads going back to the beginning of computer programming that are like things you really, really should read because it's going to shape in a positive way the way you think about programming in a broad sense. So, Out of the Tar Pit, you have the Orson Scott Card's the beekeeper analogy. I always forget the name of it. You have many white papers from the 70s and from the 60s that are like mind blowing, that they solved problems that we have today, and we've completely forgot about it. I would point people to Brett Victor and a number of his presentations that illustrate some of that. There are some really kind of everyone should really be reading this regardless of what you're programming kind of stuff. And maybe one day I'll put that together, but I don't have that with me.
So is the beekeeper with Orson Scott Card How Software Companies Die?
Yeah, that's the one. And it's really short.
I put both of these in the comments on Facebook and YouTube. So yeah, if you're looking for those, well, hopefully we get them in the show notes too, but they don't always.
So there's I wish I had a longer list of at hand, but those are. It is really amazing to go back to the 50s and the 60s and the 70s and read some of the papers that people wrote about software programming back then, and the elegance with which they solved the problems, that the current problems that we have today. And you start to think, why is everything so complicated now? It doesn't need to be that way. It's kind of wild.
Yeah. So I think AJ had a question, and then we're kind of getting toward our time. So
yeah, so this was something that you'd actually brought up either in the tweet or in some of the pre-chat email or something, but request animation frame. So totally switching gears to a technical topic, request animation frame. Do I really need to know about it? Is it really that important? How should I employ it or not? And is React using it behind the scenes?
Oh, that really, really depends. I tell you what, I know about request animation frame. I don't think I've ever actively used request animation frame. No, I may have once or twice. But it depends. It very much depends on the kind of programming you're doing. Are you doing a lot of animation? You probably do need to know that. there's so much nuance in the kinds of things, and you can go so deep into one area and become an expert in that area such that you almost never touch this other stuff that maybe most other people do. And this is what a lot of
So I was thinking, I've been using it by default lately. Like anytime that I'm going to be doing anything with a DOM, I'm doing it inside of a request animation frame. I might even do the calculation outside, but then I do the actual, replace children, insert a JSON HTML, text content equals, like any of that stuff. I just shove all of that into a request animation frame. And I was under the impression, which might be wrong, that means that when it's inside of a request animation frame, that it actually is going to get queued and batched by the browser and done all at once, rather than it cutting the browser's redraw. Because essentially every time you do a .text content or a .inner HTML, well, I guess not .text content, well, maybe potentially, but you are causing the browser to do a redraw. So if you do one on line 5 and you do another one on line 6 and another one on line 7, then you're telling the browser to redraw 3 times. And I thought that the deal was, if you use request animation frame, it's saying, hey, anything that I'm going to do that's going to redraw, wait until this completes before you do any redraws. And that maybe the browsers are optimizing that way when I don't use it.
Yeah, so that's not quite right, actually.
Good.
So if you do it outside, if you do it outside the request animation frame. So we used to talk a lot about screen thrashing, in the front end.
Yes.
And that happens when you alternatively read and write to the DOM. So if you read and then write and then read and then write and then read, then the DOM has to paint so you can read the new update, and then paint so you can read the new update. However, for a very long time, if all you're doing is reading, or if you have a batch of reads and a batch of writes, it will do those like in batches. It'll do the reads, and then if you have sequentially several writes, it will do the writes in one draw. So it'll do it all in one frame, essentially. What request animation frame does for you is, if you do it outside the request animation frame, it'll do it kind of immediately. But if you do it in the request animation frame, it waits until the browser is about to do a paint anyway, and then we'll execute on that. And that can be really useful. However, if what you're doing within that request animation frame takes longer than 16 milliseconds to accomplish, you end up getting screen thrashing again. It pauses it becomes jarring and janky. And so you have to pay close attention to the amount of time it takes to do those things. So you have to be doing all the performance testing to make sure you're staying inside of that 16 milliseconds.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, because that's something that I've just started using because I have heard about its benefits. They don't apply to the stuff I'm doing. But I don't know. Here's the thing. This is the reason that my brain went to this. Okay. Angular. You could have 100 items in a drop-down list and change something, and Angular would take noticeable time to redraw those 100 items. I'm like, that is insane. There's no way that's real. Now, I think that the people that came up with those demos, I think they must have been doing something that was horrendously wrong. But I think they were doing something like writing each of the 100 items into the drop-down list. Or I don't know. I don't exactly know how it happened. I just know that Angular used to get ridiculously slow. And again, I don't think it was Angular's fault per se, but people using non-Angular patterns in Angular or whatever. But it was one of the criticisms that drove React's success was it was easy to do really dumb things in Angular where simple modifications to the page would freeze the browser.
Yeah, that you can find the weaknesses in just about any of these frameworks. So yeah, I remember doing Angular, and the problem was always the dirty checking. If you're not managing your state well and you're forcing Angular to do the dirty checking all the time, then it's going to have super bad performance. And I ran into exactly these problems. At the same time, React with their virtual DOM means that they can calculate off of the paint thread what needs to be painted, and then in one fell swoop, paint as they do the reconciliation. That's kind of their thing. But you see now you have things like use effects and all these hooks where it becomes very easy to use them poorly. And you can get the same kind of really bad performance, really jank experience, and taking a long time to accomplish what should be pretty simple work because you're just using these use effects in really poor ways. And I'm sure the same thing can be said of Vue. I'm much less familiar with that, but I'm sure it has its own situations like that. If you have these foot guns, and all these frameworks seem to have foot guns somewhere in there.
Except HTMX.
Well, I can imagine a few scenarios in which HTMX would fall apart, but HTMX is a pretty interesting library.
yeah, but again, the surface area on HTMX is considerably smaller than, say, a React or an Angular, so that's one thing to consider. The other thing is that so I'm not as involved in the Angular community as I used to be, but they've rewritten, like you mentioned, the dirty checking. They've rewritten that like I don't even know how many times, right? And made major forward progress on that. And so, I mean, that's one nice thing about a lot of the frameworks is they see the warts a lot of times as quickly as we do. It just takes them time to figure out how to make it work for people who are using the framework. But then at the end of the day, a lot of times you get that update or upgrade for free or for a tiny bit of change when you update your framework. And so, I mean, there are some really nice reasons to use a lot of these frameworks.
And you can see that happening right now with React as well, with the React compiler that is going to
that's going to
get
change
rid of
a
all
lot.
that complexity.
Yeah, it's going to make things a lot nicer for a lot of people. We're kind of toward the end of our time. I think I'm going to push us to picks. The one follow-up I have, and so maybe we'll have you back on, Corey, is I would love to get into, now that we've kind of talked about, DOM APIs, do you need to know them? What are some of the trade-offs? Where's that going to get you and things like that. I'd actually love to have you back on and actually talk about the DOM APIs that you think people should know, right? And so you can give us a list of, a dozen or so. AJ can throw in the ones that he thinks. I'm assuming that most of the ones that most people come up with on that list, if you give us a list of 12, probably 8 of them out of anybody's list are probably going to all be the same. So then we can get in and we can say, okay, these ones are the slam dunks. These are the ones that I surprised myself by reaching for often that, most people wouldn't think of, but they just pay off. And then we can give people a direction. If you're working in a React or a Vue or an Angular, start here, right?
Yeah, that'd be fun.
All right, let's do it. We'll talk to you after the show on how to line that up. But yeah, let's move into picks. Steve, do you want to start us with picks?
Oh, we're going to the high point right off the bat, huh? All right.
That's right. I couldn't wait any longer.
Right. See, didn't have any other external picks that I can think of right now. So I'll just go to the dad jokes of the week. Actually, I'll do 4 today instead of 3. So here's proof that the annual Miss Universe pageant is fixed. Every winner has come from Earth.
That's deep.
Yeah.
My wife told me the other day that I should sign up for my company's 401k. I said, not a chance. I can't even run a mile. That's right up Chuck's alley with his running and half marathon stuff he's doing.
Iron Man. Anyway.
Now, from the moment when we first got married, from the moment I saw my wife's abacus tattoo, I knew I could count on her.
No, you can't. Those beads don't move.
Right. That's true. And then finally, I've been seeing my psychiatrist for a while, and he finally diagnosed me as a kleptomaniac. And I said, is there anything I can take for it? Those are the dad jokes of the week.
All right. AJ, what are your picks?
First thing I'm going to pick is grugbrain.dev, which is one of the most recent additions that I've added to creedsofcraftsmanship.com. It is, I believe it's by, I don't want to say who it's by. I don't want to give any bias, but I think it's pretty clear who it's by once you reach the end of it, because I think he says so. But it is, if you've ever seen the Grug Brain meme, it's like big brain think multiple inheritance, multi-layer system very good, but Grug Brain no. Grug Brain too stupid for big brain inheritance. Grug Brain use simple object and get work done. It's a little bit hard to read because the whole thing is written in that style, which is, it's great for a joke, but it's not good for an entire article. But the entire article's written that way, and I don't think there was a single thing I disagreed with in it. Because I'm definitely a Grug Brain dev. So if you think that you might be too dumb to understand all the stuff that's going on in web dev these days, you might find great relief in joining the geniuses of grugbrain.dev.
Well, as he says at the end, under the category of imposter syndrome, any young grug read this far probably do fine in program career, even if frustrations and worry is always to be there. Sorry.
Yep.
Yeah.
Another pick is, we're talking about what's a good place to find material to learn. So I've been compiling Creeds of Craftsmanship. Most of the stuff that's on there has been on there for a while. Every once in a while I add something new. And the most recent two things are the grugbrain.dev, and then it was actually the original talk that inspired Ken C. Dodd's AHA programming that I can't, let me go look at it real quick to bring what the name was. But anyway, I add stuff to this, and it's non-denominational other than that it's all pretty much Grugbrain. But it's not really favoring a particular framework or language. It's pretty much just the keys of success to becoming a great developer. Yeah, one of the most recent ones, it's really old, from 2014 RailsConf, All the Little Things by Sandy Metz, and that's actually cited in in one of Ken C. Dodd's resources on avoid hasty abstractions, but I hadn't put it on there before. It was really good. There were a couple of things towards the end I disagreed with, but then again, she's giving such a small example of her toy project where she starts to implement inheritance in it, which, I'm definitely in the camp of inheritance is evil, but maybe there's a larger example where there is an exception to an inheritance is evil, but she makes a case that it's not always evil. I think, anyway, so there's that. And then lastly, we're talking about high performance jQuery alternatives. You've got to try a jQuery. It's been released on Twitter, the latest incarnation. Unfortunately, because it's now AI enhanced, it no longer fits in a tweet as text. So I had to take a picture of it, because now we've got types in there. It's fully documented. And yeah, it really, ran it through ChatGPT to make sure it's up to snuff. But yeah, and uncompressed, it's kind of big. It's like, I don't know, 200 bytes or so, but you gzip that down and deliver it. It's best thing ever, hottest thing since sliced bread. So get it while it's hot. AJ Query 3.0.3. It's a big one, y'all.
If you added the AI to it, it should be AJPT query.
Yeah, that one's taken. It's already
okay. I'm just trying to help, and I don't know. Maybe you're not the AJ behind it, but anyway, I'm gonna. Are you done? I was gonna just jump into my picks, and then I realized I might have cut you off.
No, that was it. That was
okay.
it.
So every year, I go to a board game convention here in Utah, in Provo. It's called TimpCon. And I wind up helping out with the hot games tables and teaching people how to play board games. I usually take Friday off and go play board games all day Friday too. This year I'm not going to be able to do that, but so I wind up learning like 6 new games every time. I'm going to pick a game that I've already picked on the show because I know how to play it, and we've been. I taught my wife and my kids how to play it yesterday. It was funny because my 15-year-old was like, "I don't really want to play." And, because if you have 15-year-olds, you get it. You understand. It's like, I don't know if this is going to be cool. And anyway, we convinced her to sit down and play it, right? It's like, look, 45 minutes. Okay, I'll do 45 minutes. And by the end, she was like, this is fun. So anyway, that's my testimonial for it. Like, she was smiling at the end of the game. Of course, she also won, so that might have helped too. My 17-year-old enjoyed it. My 9-year-old kept wanting to play. It might have been the deck building piece of it might have been a little beyond her, but we could literally just tell her, look, try and get all of the same color and get the highest numbers you can. And I think she would actually do okay just playing that strategy. But effectively what it is, it's a blend of capture the flag and war in a tournament style. And then there's the deck building component, right? And so you basically curate a deck. And what you do is somebody starts, they play a card, that card captures the flag, and then their opponent plays cards until their cards total equal to or more than the top card of the other player's pile that's captured the flag. And then they capture the flag from them. The cards in the other player's pile go onto the bench. You can stack cards of the same kind on the bench, and you have 6 slots on your bench. When your bench is full and you can't place another card on it, if you need to place another card on it, you can't, you lose. If you run out of cards and you can't beat the other player's pile, you lose the round. And then you get the trophy that's on top of the trophy pile on that field that you're playing on. And so it's basically a one-on-one. So if you're playing 8 players, there are 4 one-on-one fields, and then you each have a schedule where you rotate to play against the other people. And you play 7 rounds. The 2 top scorers at the end of the 7 rounds go on a head-to-head for the final, and whoever wins that wins. And so in the final, it was me versus my 15-year-old, and she beat me. So anyway, it's super fun. Board Game Geek says it's a 1.79. So it's pretty approachable for the casual gamer. The setup's pretty simple. There aren't a ton of pieces. You have different color cards that do different things, right? So that's where the deck building comes into play. Is like one of them will say if this is on your bench, then you get a certain ability, or you might get a card that says when you play this, or sometimes it doesn't even say when you play this, which means that if it's as soon as you play it or whenever it's out, it does the thing. Right. And so I had a card that said, if there are any other purple cards on your bench, then this card has +3 power. Right. So it was a 1. But if I played another purple card and had it on my bench, then it was a 4. Right. And so anyway, so that's the rest of it. Some of them let you collect points toward the end of the game because the trophies are worth points, but you also have a pile of just loose points. And so some of them say if this card captures the flag, right, if it's the last card you play before you capture the flag, then you get points. So anyway, whoever has the 2 people that have the top number of points at the end of the 7 rounds, they go head to head and you win. You're probably wondering, can you play with an odd number of players? The answer is yes. It has a robot deck. And so if you're playing against a robot, you play both sides. And so that robot deck has stuff in it like this card is as powerful as the current round. So if you're on round 1, it's a 1, right? And so since your deck isn't strong, the robot's deck isn't as strong either. But you get to round 6, and it's got some cards that before weren't giving you a whole lot of problems, and now they are. But you should have a stronger deck by then, too. And so you just play the robot through, and then the 2 players with the highest scores, right? But if you lose to the robot, it gets the trophy, right? So anyway, super fun. Really enjoy it. I'll probably we're doing 6 games at the board game conference. So for the next 5 or 6 weeks, you're going to get a whole bunch of other ones. One of the other games is another version of Challengers. I just haven't played it. It's called Challengers Beach Cup. So I'll let you know when I learn how that goes. But I'm imagining it's pretty similar to Challengers. As far as other picks go, I've got a couple of other things. I think Steve mentioned Chuck's half marathons or whatever. I just want to clarify. I'm training for an Ironman. I'm going to do it next year. I plan to break my body over a Saturday or a Sunday, depending on when the race is. And then I'll show up the next day for this podcast, and you'll hear me talking out of the puddle of whatever's left of me. But anyway,
sorry, I didn't mean to undersell you there, Chuck.
No, it's okay. So I've been doing a couple of things, and I'm just going to quickly shout out what those are. I've been using Training Peaks, and then I bought a 48-week training program for an Ironman that just goes into Training Peaks. It syncs up with my Garmin app, which means it goes onto my watch. And so I just tell it I'm doing the workout for today on my watch, and then it times me and does all my laps and everything. So that's pretty nice. I've also been doing some strength training. I signed up for a transformation challenge is what they call it, with a company called First Form, and they spell form PHORM. And man, their stuff is it's awesome. It kick butt. They do sell a bunch of supplements, right? So I wound up buying a bunch of their other stuff, but their trainer's been terrific. Any questions I have, she's walked me through all the stuff I need to learn and know. It's just been amazing. So I'm going to pick that. I'm going to put a link in YouTube and hopefully get it into the show notes. That's my referral link. Now, I don't get paid for the referral link. I think I might get some free swag from First Form if I'm entered into a drawing or something. I think that's how that works. But anyway, I'm just putting it out there because it's been amazing. And if you use my link, then you join my coach's. You join under my coach, and she's been amazing. So I just want to get you what I'm getting because it works and it's great. So far I've lost like 8-10 pounds, and that's over like 3 weeks, 2-3 weeks. But the other thing is my gym has an in-body body scanner.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've lost like 12 pounds in fat, and I've put the rest back on in muscle. And so I'm feeling terrific. My diabetes is well under control. It's been a really good thing for me.
Are you type 2?
As the health, what?
Are you type 2 diabetes?
Type 2 diabetes,
type
yeah.
2. Okay.
So it's been awesome. I've been type 2 diabetic for like 18 years. So
yeah, I know if I was to do an Ironman, they would measure my time in days instead of hours.
They close the course after a while, Steve.
Right. I might get kicked. Yeah, they'd be, okay, Steve, go home, but I mean, I could do the swimming really well and the biking pretty good. The running, they just have to follow my holes in the pavement. That's how I'm heavy footed.
Yeah.
So.
The bike is what I'm struggling with. I have a Wahoo trainer that I bought, and it's been great. And I'll pick that next time and tell you what I bought. And then there was something else that I wanted to shout out about. So this weekend, I went to, it was a retreat for faith-based entrepreneurs. It was 3 days, amazing stuff, big breakthroughs. I need to go and find the best link to kind of put you into the community that I connected with for that. But, I just got a lot of clarity on who I'm supposed to be and what I'm supposed to be doing. And I encourage people to just find, if you're a person of faith and you're trying to be an entrepreneur, find people who are doing that. If you're not a person of faith and you just want to be a better programmer, go find people who are doing that. Whatever your ambition is, and whatever your identity is, go find that and go find people who are being excellent at what it is you want to be, that you have a lot of things in common with. Because I guarantee you, if you get with those people and you go deep, you're going to have some really, really eye-opening breakthroughs. So that's my pick, or those are my picks. Corey, what are your picks?
Yeah. So this one isn't my pick yet, but did you guys hear about the circus? I understand it's going to be intense.
I heard that coming.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It's my favorite. No, my pick is a absolutely shameless self plug. I mentioned at the top that I'm in St. George. I am at a vacation rental that we recently bought and is now ready for renters. So if you are interested, and it's in this really cool community called Desert Color. There's this beautiful lagoon, and it is fantastic. We have a condo. It sleeps 7. It's 3 bedrooms, and it is available for rent. And I can give a promotion code that maybe we could put in the show notes. So if you want to come down to St. George, man, this is the place. This is the place.
Now, are you
Call me
what?
the
Are you
I
near,
might book it. Go to St. George.
you're near what? Bryce Canyon and Zion? Are
So
you?
yeah, we're not far from Zion. Not too far from Bryce Canyon. It's probably about an hour.
Oh, you're right. You're right in the corner on the border, aren't you?
We're on the border of Arizona.
Yeah, literally.
So
Okay.
yeah.
So Lake Powell's to the east, and yeah,
Yep.
did make the Zion. when I was down
Powell's
there.
a bit of a drive. It's a
okay.
ways. It's
But
on
if you're
the other
going
side of the
to
state.
Tuacahn out here,
Yeah.
it's real short. There's actually
Tuacahn, it's
surprisingly-
concerts and plays, performances.
Concerts
if you're
and
not
plays,
familiar.
yeah.
Oh, I thought maybe it was that Hawk Tua girl, but okay.
Nope, not her.
not
There's a
her.
lot
Okay.
of arts out here, and there's a surprising number of like state parks that are really
Mm-hmm.
great as well that aren't Zion. So
Yeah,
it's-
but you're
you're-
definitely within striking distance of Zion National Park.
Yeah,
Oh,
you're
so-
just southwest of there. Okay, yeah.
Yeah,
I
you're
love that
5
whole
minutes from the
area.
airport. So if you're flying in, we're real close to that too. So
there's a Top Golf right there too.
it's we call it bottom golf. It's big shots. It's not Top Golf.
Oh, it's not Top Golf.
Same idea. It's called Big Shots. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, my wife and I and my father-in-law, my sister-in-law, and her husband, we go down to St. George every year for the Parade of Homes.
Mhm.
And yeah, so we'd be driving past it every year and, oh, look, it's almost done.
Yep. And we just adore this community out here. And in a week and a half or so, we'll be getting a hot tub here in our condo. So it's going to be even better.
Oh, man, sign me
dude.
up. All right, good deal. Yeah, I might have to pick your brain on how to buy one because that's kind of my new dream is I want to own a bunch of real estate. But anyway.
They don't make money month over month right now. Not down here. Not yet.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I don't. Well, we'll see. But that's we don't expect it to. We're in it for the equity.
All right.
Okay. Well, if people want to follow up and check out what you are doing, maybe in the programming space, how do they find you online, Corey?
So you can find me mostly. So I'm very quiet actually online. I don't really get on too much. It was kind of an accident. I swooped into Twitter and made the comment that I did. But you can find most of my stuff at 365jsthings.tech. That's my website. I have all of my articles, my talks, presentations, slide decks up there. And that's probably, or at me on Twitter if you want to talk. I'll respond to that. But
I won't say what your email is, but I like it.
well, you can email me at Corey at 365jsthings.tech. That's not the one that
Right.
you're referring to, but
No.
Yeah.
All right, good deal. Well, thanks for coming, Corey. This was great. And yeah, let's get that other one booked because I'd love to dive into, hey, you may not know that the DOM did this. Or
Yeah,
you,
some fun
you may
stuff.
not have known that the browser did this for you. So, all right. Well, we'll wrap it up. Till next time, folks. Max out.